The night was heavy and cold. The stars above were hidden behind dark clouds, and the moon gave only a faint light. The world lay quiet, too quiet, as if even the wind was afraid to move. Among the broken streets and burned houses, a lone figure walked. She was a mother, her face tired, her steps slow, her arms holding a small child close to her chest. The city around her was once alive, filled with voices, filled with markets and music. Now it was only ash and shadows. Walls stood broken, doors hung open, streets were covered with dust and bones. Every step she took was careful. Every sound made her heart beat faster, for in the silence of the night danger waited. The child in her arms moved weakly. His breath was shallow, his body light as if life itself was leaving him. She looked down at him and whispered softly, "Hold on, little one. Just hold on." Her own stomach was empty, but she could not think of herself. All that mattered was the child. Her people had lost everything. The war had taken homes, food, safety, and hope. The invaders came with fire and machines, and nothing was the same after that. Some fought, some fled, many died. She was one of the few who remained, and now she wandered the ruins, searching for something. Anything to keep her son alive. Her eyes scanned the broken buildings. Once she might have found food in the markets, water in the wells, or kindness in neighbors. But now the wells were poisoned, the markets empty, and neighbors gone. The silence was worse than the hunger. It made her feel like the last living soul in a world that had forgotten mercy. Then she saw it, light, far ahead, at the edge of the ruins. There was a glow. It flickered like fire, steady and warm. She froze. Her heart racing. Light meant people, and people could mean danger or salvation. She had heard stories of humans, the strange visitors who had arrived years ago. Some called them saviors, some called them conquerors. Her people did not know what to believe, but tonight, she did not care about stories. Her child was dying, and stories would not feed him. The mother stood for a long moment, her eyes fixed on that glow. Her mind battled itself. If she went, they might reject her. If she went, they might harm her. But if she stayed here, her child would surely die. That truth was sharper than any fear. So she walked step by step toward the light. Her legs trembled as she moved through the ruins. Every shadow looked like an enemy. Every sound felt like a trap. The child whimpered softly, his tiny hand clutching. Her torn clothes, she pressed him closer and whispered, "We will find help. We must." As she drew nearer, the glow became clearer. It was not fire from war. It was fire from a camp. Wood burned in tall barrels, and figures moved around it. Metal shone in the light, weapons in their hands. They were humans, tall and strong, their eyes sharp, her breath caught in her throat. She had never been this close to them before. From afar, she had seen their machines, their walls, their banners, but standing at their gate was different. Her knees felt weak, and for a moment she thought about turning back, but then the child coughed, a thin, painful sound that cut into her soul. There was no turning back now. Her bare feet touched the cold ground as she stopped before the gate. The humans on the wall looked down, their weapons pointed, their faces unreadable. She raised her head slowly, her voice shaking but clear. "Please," she whispered, "just a little food for my child." The silence that followed was deep. The fire crackled, the night wind blew. The humans did not answer right away. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought they must hear it. In that silence, hope and fear lived together. One wrong move, one harsh word, and her last chance would vanish. The mother held her child tighter, waiting. Her plea hung in the air, fragile but full of desperate strength. And in that silent night, humanity had to decide. Would they turn her away, or would they listen? The gate stood tall, made of steel and shadows. The mother looked up at it with fear in her eyes. She had come this far, but now her legs refused to move. The humans on the wall stared down at her, silent as stone, their weapons aimed behind. Her lay the ruins in death. In front of her stood the only hope. Her arms tightened around her child. His breath was weak, his small face pale. She whispered again, almost too soft to hear. "Please, food for my child?" Her words floated in the cold night air, fragile like glass. One soldier leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. He had seen beggars before, he had heard lies before, but something in the mother's voice was different. It carried no trick, no anger, only truth and pain. He did not lower his weapon, but his hand trembled. The gate creaked as it opened slightly. Not wide, not enough to welcome, only enough to test. A beam of firelight spilled onto the mother, her torn clothes, her tired face, her child clinging to life. Every scar told a story. Every tear spoke louder than words. The humans muttered among themselves. "Could be a trap," one said. "She might be a spy," another warned. But the youngest soldier shook his head. "Look at the child," he whispered. "A spy does not carry a dying child." The mother stood still, her body stiff. She dared not move closer. She dared not step back. Every second stretched like a blade against her throat. The child whimpered, a thin sound that broke the silence. And that sound pierced the soldiers' hearts deeper than any weapon. At last, one soldier reached into his pack. He pulled out a piece of bread, rough but warm. With slow steps, he came forward. The mother's breath caught, her eyes wide. She thought he might strike her, but instead he knelt down. The bread passed from his hand to hers. Her fingers shook as she held it. She pressed it to her child's lips. The boy opened his mouth weakly, chewing with what little strength remained. For the first time in many nights, he swallowed something more than sorrow. The mother's tears fell, not from pain but from relief. She whispered, "Thank you," her voice breaking. The soldier looked away, ashamed of the warmth rising in his chest. He had seen too much war, too much death, but in that moment he felt human again. The other soldiers watched in silence. Some frowned, afraid of weakness. Others lowered their weapons, unsure of what to feel. The commander stepped forward, his boots heavy, his eyes hard. He studied the woman as if weighing her soul. "Food is one thing," he said coldly, "but shelter is another." The mother bowed her head. "I ask for nothing more," she whispered. "Only food and I will go." Her words were honest, but her eyes betrayed her fear. If she left, her child would not last another night. The commander's gaze moved to the child. The boy's eyes were half closed, his lips dry, his skin pale. A memory stirred inside the commander's mind. His own daughter years ago before the war. He clenched his jaw. Fighting the ache in his heart, he turned away, but his voice shook slightly when he spoke. "Let her stay by the fire," he ordered. The gate opened wider with a deep groan. The mother gasped softly, not believing her ears. She stepped forward, slowly, afraid it was a trick. But when she crossed the threshold, no hand stopped her. The camp was alive with human firelight. Tents and weapons stood side by side. Faces turned to watch her as she walked in. Some suspicious, some curious, some with quiet pity. The warmth of the fire touched her skin, and for the first time in weeks she felt alive. She sat by the flames holding her child. The boy ate more bread, his small hands clutching it as if it were treasure. The mother closed her eyes, whispering, "Thanks again and again." Her heart still trembled with fear. But in that moment she also felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. Outside the walls the night still howled with silence and danger. But inside by the fire a story was beginning. A story not of war and hate, but of a plea, a knock, and the first spark of trust. The mother had asked for food, nothing more. Yet humanity had opened a door she never dreamed would open. The fire burned low, its glow painting long shadows across the camp. The mother sat close to it, the child in her lap. Every flicker of the flame showed the truth on her face, exhaustion, sorrow, and a small thread of hope that refused to die. The UI. Humans watched her carefully. Some sat with weapons resting on their knees. Others stood guard at the edge of the light. Their eyes were sharp, trained by war and fear. But when they looked at the child, those eyes softened. If only for a moment, The youngest soldier, the one who had given the bread, could not look away. He saw the boy chewing slowly, his lips trembling but his will strong. It reminded him of nights long ago when his own sister had fought hunger with the same stubborn strength. He rubbed his weary eyes, as if to push away the memory, but it stayed, burning deep inside him. The mother noticed his stare. For a moment she feared he judged her, feared he thought her weak or unworthy. But then she saw it, the same pain in his eyes that lived in her heart. It was not judgment, it was recognition. He knew what hunger looked like. He knew what loss felt like. The commander stood a little apart, his arms folded, his face unreadable. He did not speak, but his silence was louder than words. The soldiers glanced at him, waiting, wondering what his decision would mean. Would the woman and child be sent away when the fire died? Or would tonight mark something different, something dangerous? The mother lowered her head. She whispered to her child, singing an old song from her people. Her voice was soft and broken, but the melody carried across the camp. It spoke of rivers and fields of homes now gone. The soldiers listened in silence, each man hearing not her language but the emotion behind it. The child's breathing grew stronger as he ate more. His tiny fingers clutched the bread with desperate strength. The mother's tears fell onto his hair, shining in the firelight. For her, this was a miracle. For the soldiers, it was a reminder of why they still fought. One soldier leaned toward another, whispering, "She asked only for food." The other nodded, frowning. "And yet, here she sits in our firelight." They both knew it was no small thing, for trust was rare, and war had taught them suspicion more than mercy. The youngest soldier could not stay silent. He spoke softly, almost to Y, himself. "She is just a mother," he said, "nothing more." The commander's eyes snapped to him, sharp as steel. "Nothing more?" he repeated. The camp grew still, waiting for his judgment. The commander stepped closer, his boots striking the dirt. He stopped before the mother, staring down at her, her body tensed, ready for rejection, ready for the order to leave. But the commander's gaze shifted to the child, the boy's chest rising and falling, weak but steady. For a long moment the fire crackled between them. Then the commander closed his eyes. Behind his weary gaze, memories returned uninvited. His own child, taken by sickness, years ago. No war, no weapon, no strength had saved her. He opened his eyes again, and the hardness there had softened, if only slightly. "Eat," he said simply, his voice low but steady. "Stay by the fire until morning." The mother's breath broke into a sob. She bowed her head, whispering thank you again and again. The soldiers exchanged glances, surprised but silent. The youngest soldier smiled faintly, relief flooding his weary heart. He reached into his pack again, offering water this time. The mother accepted it with shaking hands. The child drank, coughing, then resting his head against her chest. A color of life returned to his cheeks, weak but real. The commander turned away, hiding his face in shadow. The decision weighed on him, heavier than his armor. Mercy could be a weapon against them, kindness could be a danger. And yet, as he looked at the firelight and the fragile figures beside it, he knew the truth. Sometimes humanity was measured not by walls or guns, but by weary eyes that refused to turn away. The night deepened, the stars slowly returning above the clouds. The mother held her child and whispered prayers she thought she had forgotten. The soldiers kept watch, but their hearts were no longer made only of iron. Something had shifted in the silence of that night. It was small, it was fragile, but it was real. The beginning of trust, the beginning of something greater than fear. And as the fire burned on, the mother closed her eyes, for the first time in many nights, not with dread but with a fragile peace. Her plea had been heard, and her child was safe for now. The weary eyes of humanity had chosen to see her, and in that choice, a spark of tomorrow had been lit. The night had grown colder, but around the fire the warmth held strong. The mother, sat wrapped in a blanket given by one of the soldiers. Her child lay against her chest, his breathing deeper now, his small hands resting in peace. The flames cracked and snapped, rising into the dark sky like sparks of forgotten hope. The humans watched quietly. Some sharpened their blades, others cleaned their rifles, but their eyes kept drifting back to the fire. The woman and her child had become part of the circle. Though no words had been spoken to welcome them, it was not food alone that kept them there. It was something deeper, something unspoken. The youngest soldier sat nearest. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring into the flames. He thought of the boy, and the way his thin arms had clutched the bread as if it were treasure. That image burned into him more fiercely than any battle memory. It reminded him that survival was not only about strength, but about compassion. The mother lifted her eyes once. She met the soldier's gaze, her lips forming a faint smile. It was weak, trembling but real. In that moment a bridge was built, silent yet strong. Two worlds meeting in the glow of the same fire, but not all eyes were soft. At the edge of the circle, a soldier spat into the dirt, his jaw tight. "We are fools," he muttered, too low for the commander but loud enough for others to hear. "Kindness is weakness. Tomorrow she may call her people and we will pay the price." A few nodded, unease spreading through the camp. The commander raised his head, his expression hard. He knew their fear, for it lived inside him too. But as he watched the woman tuck the blanket tighter around her child, his heart argued with his mind. War had taught him suspicion, but war had also taken everything he loved. If mercy was weakness, then what was the point of surviving? The fire crackled louder as if demanding an answer. The mother bowed her head and whispered a prayer. Her voice was soft but carried in the still air. Not all understood her words, but they felt the weight of them. It was the sound of someone clinging to life, someone daring to hope again. The youngest soldier could not remain silent. "She asked for food," he said quietly, his voice steady. "We gave her bread, and now the child breathes again." He looked around the circle, meeting the eyes of his brothers in arms. "If that is weakness, then I will be weak." The firelight caught the lines on the commander's weary face. He let the silence stretch, every soldier waiting. Then at last he spoke, his tone low but firm. "Tonight they are not beggars," he said. "Tonight they are our guests." The words carried weight. The muttering ceased, the unease dimmed. Some still doubted, but none challenged him. The commander's word was law, and with those words the camp shifted. The woman was no longer an intruder. She was under their protection. The mother lifted her eyes, tears shining. She did not understand all their language, but she knew what his voice meant. Her body shook as she whispered, "Thank you again," her voice breaking like glass. The firelight warmed her face, but it was their mercy that warmed her heart. The boy stirred, opening his eyes just enough to see the light. He made a small sound, not of pain, but of comfort. The mother kissed his hair, her tears falling onto his skin. For the first time since the war had begun, she allowed herself to believe he might live, and that belief filled her with fire stronger than any hunger. The commander turned away, his hand tightening on the hilt of his sword. He could not show his heart, not to his men, not to himself. But inside, a battle raged louder than any fought on the field. The battle between duty and compassion, between fear and hope. And as the flames danced, he knew which side had already begun to win. The night stretched on, but the camp did not feel the same. Where once suspicion had ruled, now a quiet fire of trust flickered. It was small, fragile, but alive. And in a world torn by war, even a spark was enough to change everything. The mother closed her eyes at last, her child safe in her arms, the fire warming them both. She whispered a promise, only he could hear. "We will live. We will see tomorrow." And around them the humans kept their silent watch, their weary eyes softened by the fire inside them. A fire not born of war, but of something far greater. The fire of humanity. Morning came slowly. The sky above the ruined land turned from black to gray, from gray to pale gold. The fire in the camp still smoked, carrying the smell of burned wood into the wind. The mother sat awake, her child resting in her lap. She had not slept, but for the first time in many nights her body felt light. Her boy was still alive, and that was enough. The soldiers moved around the camp preparing for the day. They cleaned their weapons, checked their supplies, and sharpened their knives, but their eyes kept drifting toward the stranger by the fire, some with pity, some with suspicion. The air was heavy, not with silence this time, but with questions. The youngest soldier, the one who had given bread, crouched near the fire. He offered a piece of dried meat to the mother. She accepted with shaking hands, broke it and fed her child first. The boy chewed slowly, color returning to his face little by little. The soldier smiled faintly, but when he looked up he saw the frown of another comrade. That comrade spoke sharply. "We cannot keep them." "Here," he said, his voice like iron. "Every mouth we feed is one less for us. Every stranger we shelter is a risk." Others nodded in agreement, their eyes hard. One spat into the dirt. "Today she is a mother. Tomorrow she may bring enemies." The mother heard the tone, even if she did not understand every word. Her heart sank. She pulled her child closer, ready for rejection, ready for the order to leave. Her hand shook as she thought of the cold outside the camp walls. If they sent her away now, hope would die with her boy. The youngest soldier rose too, his feet, his jaw tight. "She asked for food, nothing more," he said, "and we gave it. The child lives because of us. Is that not proof of who we are?" The men muttered, shifting uneasily. But fear ran deep in them, fear carved by years of war. The commander stepped forward, his cloak heavy on his shoulders. His face was carved. With lines of battle and burden, he looked at his men, then at the mother, then back at his men again. His silence was louder than their arguments. Everyone waited, knowing his word would decide her fate. The mother bowed her head. Her voice shook as she whispered, "If you wish me to go, I will go, but my child, he will not live outside these walls." Her honesty cut through the camp like a blade. There was no trick in her voice, no plan, only truth. One soldier clenched his fists, muttering, "We are soldiers, not saviors." But the oldest among them, a man with silver in his hair and scars across his face, spoke. His voice was rough but steady. "I have seen too many battles," he said. "I have buried too many children." He looked at the mother, then at the commander. "If we give only food, we save them for one night. If we give them a home, we save a future." The camp grew still, the words sinking deep. The mother lifted her eyes, tears shining. The commander's gaze hardened, but not with anger, with decision. He turned to his men, his voice sharp but steady. "You fear weakness," he said. "But mercy is not weakness. Mercy is strength." Some soldiers lowered their heads ashamed, others still looked uneasy, but none spoke against him. The choice had been made. The mother and child would not be turned away. They would stay, under the protection of the humans. The mother broke into tears, clutching her child as if the world had been given back to her. She whispered thanks over and over, her words trembling. The youngest soldier smiled faintly, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The oldest soldier nodded, his eyes soft. Despite the scars, the commander stood tall, his voice carrying across the camp. "Remember this," he said. "We fight not only for land, not only for victory, but for what makes us human. If we lose that, we lose everything." The soldiers listened, their hearts stirred by his words. The fear did not vanish, but something stronger grew in its place, a fire of unity, of purpose, of compassion that gave meaning to their struggle. The mother looked at her child, his eyes half open, his lips curving into the smallest smile. It was weak, fragile, but it was life. And for her, that smile was worth more than all the food in the world. The sun climbed higher, washing the camp in pale light. The ruins outside the walls still whispered of death and loss. But inside the camp, something new had been born. Not just survival, not just suspicion, but a choice. A choice to stand as more than warriors. A choice to be human. The sun rose slowly over the broken land. Its light touched the ruins first, painting shattered walls in gold. Then it reached the human camp where smoke curled upward from last night's fire. The night of fear and debate had passed, and now the morning carried a quiet promise. The mother opened her eyes, her arms still, holding the child. For a moment she did not remember where she was. She only felt warmth on her skin, the sound of boots moving and the smell of firewood. Then she saw the tents, the humans, the soldiers standing guard. It was not a dream. Her child was alive, and they had not sent her away. The boy stirred, blinking in the new light. His lips curved into a small smile, the first in many days. The mother kissed his forehead, whispering thanks to whatever power had led her here. She knew the danger was not over, but for this morning, they had been given something rare. Safety. The soldiers moved about their work. Some built fires, some prepared rations, others cleaned weapons, yet their eyes still turned toward the mother and child. Curiosity, suspicion, pity. Each glance carried its own weight, but none moved to drive her away. The choice had been made, and now they would live with it. The youngest soldier came with water and bread. He placed it gently near the mother, avoiding too many words. She nodded, whispering a quiet thank you. The boy reached for the bread, chewing with more strength than before. The soldier smiled faintly and stepped back. He felt lighter, as if this small act had lifted years of war from his shoulders. But whispers still moved through the camp. Some feared that kindness would cost them their lives. Others felt uneasy, as if mercy had opened a door to weakness. Yet when they looked at the boy's fragile smile, their anger faded. It was hard to hate a child who clutched bread like treasure. The commander stood at the edge of the camp watching. His mind was heavy with the decision he had made. He had risked his men's trust. He had risked their safety. But as the sun climbed higher, he felt no regret. For he saw what mercy had done. It had turned despair into hope, and hope was a weapon no enemy could break. The mother sat quietly, but her eyes were alive, shining with a light she had not carried in weeks. She looked at the humans, their hard faces, their tired movements, and she saw not enemies, not monsters, but protectors. For the first time since the war, she believed her people might still have a future. As the morning stretched on, the camp grew louder. Children's laughter echoed. The sound came from the boy. It was weak but clear, ringing like music among the tents. The soldiers paused at the sound, some smiling despite themselves. Others shook their heads, muttering that such softness would get them killed. But even those men felt something stir in their hearts, for laughter in war was rare and precious. The oldest soldier, the one with silver hair and scars, crouched near the boy. He handed him a wooden carving, shaped like a bird. The boy's eyes widened, his small hands clutching it tightly. The mother's eyes filled with tears. The old soldier said nothing, but his silence carried meaning. He had lost much in this war, but he still had kindness to give. The commander called his men together. His voice was steady, strong, carrying across the camp. "We are soldiers," he said, "but we are more than that. We fight for survival. Yes, but we also fight for a tomorrow worth living in." He pointed toward the mother and child. "This is why we endure. Not to destroy, but to protect." The men listened, some nodding, some still uncertain, but none could argue, for they had seen with their own eyes what mercy had done. A dying child now breathed, a broken mother now smiled. It was proof that humanity's strength was not only in steel, but in heart. The mother lowered her head, tears falling. She did not understand all their words, but she knew their meaning. These humans had given her more than food, more than safety. They had given her dignity. They had given her a reason to believe in tomorrow. The boy laughed again, his voice rising with the wind. The sound carried across the camp, across the ruins. It was a small sound, fragile as glass, but to the humans, it was a battle cry louder than any drum, for it reminded them why they fought. Why they endured, not just to win but to protect life itself. The new dawn stretched wide across the sky. The ruins still stood, the war still raged. But within the walls of the human camp, something greater than fear had taken root. Hope had been born again, and with it the promise of a future. The mother closed her eyes, holding her child close. Her heart whispered the truth she now believed. Last night I asked for food. But today humanity has given me far more. And with the fire of dawn shining on her face, she believed it with all her soul. The night returned, soft and cool. The stars shone brightly now, no clouds hiding their light. The camp glowed with fires, voices of soldiers low but steady. The ruins outside remained dark and broken, yet inside the walls, life stirred with new warmth. The mother sat close to the fire, her child resting peacefully against her chest, his face no longer pale, his breathing stronger, his small hand clutching the wooden carving given by the old soldier. Each rise of his chest was a gift. Each laugh earlier in the day was a treasure. The mother whispered a prayer of thanks, her words carried upward into the night sky. The youngest soldier sat across from her, cleaning his rifle, but his eyes drifted, often to the boy. He still remembered how fragile the child had looked when they first opened the gate. Now, though weak, the boy's spirit had returned. The soldier smiled faintly, realizing that he had helped in something greater than battle. He had helped protect life. The other soldiers were quieter now. Some still looked uneasy, their instincts hardened by war, but even they could not deny the truth in front of them. The child was alive, the mother was grateful, and the camp itself felt less heavy. It was as if kindness had added strength to their fire. The commander walked through the camp, his boots steady on the dirt. He carried the weight of command, the burden of choices made. But tonight his steps felt lighter. He saw his men not only as fighters but as protectors. And when his gaze fell upon the mother and child, he saw not risk, but reason. He paused by the fire, his shadow stretching long. The mother looked up, her eyes wide with both fear and respect. The commander studied her for a moment, then spoke, his voice deep but gentle. "You came asking for food," he said, "but you will not leave with only bread." The mother bowed her head, tears filling her eyes. She whispered, "You gave me life. That is more than enough." But the commander shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "We gave you only what was human to give. What comes next is more." The soldiers nearby listened, their faces lit by firelight. Some leaned closer, curious. Others sat still, waiting for his words. The commander raised his hand, pointing toward the empty ground near the tents. "Clear a place there," he ordered. "Build shelter, not just for tonight but for tomorrow." The camp stirred in surprise, some muttered in doubt, but none spoke against him. The oldest soldier nodded, his scarred face calm. The youngest smiled faintly, pride warming his chest. The mother covered, her mouth unable to believe what she had heard. Humans moved quickly, pulling wood, cloth, and rope. They built a simple shelter, strong enough to keep out wind and cold. The firelight glowed on their hands as they worked together. It was not only labor. It was a promise that the mother and child were no longer strangers, but part of something greater. When the shelter was ready, the commander stepped aside. He gestured toward it, his face unreadable but his eyes softer than before. The mother rose, clutching her child. Her legs trembled as she walked, each step heavy with disbelief. At the doorway, she turned back, her tears shining in the light. "You gave me more than food," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You gave me a home." The soldiers stood silent, their hearts stirred by her words. Some looked away, ashamed of their earlier doubts. Others held their heads high, proud of what they had chosen. And deep inside, each man felt the same truth. This was why humanity endured, not only to fight, but to build, to protect, to give. The boy lay down in the shelter, resting on soft blankets. His small smile remained even in sleep. The mother sat beside him, her tears finally falling without fear. For the first time since war had taken everything, she felt not like a beggar, but like a person. For the first time, she belonged. The commander turned to his men. "This is what sets us apart," he said quietly. "Not our weapons, not our walls, but our will to give when others would take." The fire crackled, carrying his words through the camp. The soldiers nodded, their eyes reflecting both firelight and conviction. Above them, the stars burned brighter. The world outside was still broken. The war still raged. But here, within these walls, a new seed had been planted, a seed of trust, of compassion, of humanity's strength. The mother closed her eyes, whispering to her child, "Last night I asked only for bread, but tonight we have been given tomorrow." Her voice was soft, but every soldier near the fire heard it, and in that moment none doubted that her words were true, for humanity's greatest gift was not food, not shelter, not safety. It was hope. Hope strong enough to rebuild a life. Hope powerful enough to light even the darkest night. And in that hope, the mother and child found a home. Not only in the shelter they were given, but in the hearts of those who chose mercy over fear.